Well, now on BBC One, more hidden treasures and tucked-away family heirlooms get to see the light of day as the Antiques Roadshow rolls into town.
The coast of Yorkshire and the resort of Bridlington is our destination for this week's Antiques Roadshow. Bridlington has been a favourite spot for generations of Yorkshiremen and their families, a town where the traditional industries of tourism and fishing exist happily side by side. Of the two, fishing is by far the longer established. For at least 1,500 years, men have been harvesting the sea here, and for much of that time using locally built boats like this. They're known as cobbles. Their specially designed, shallow draft allows them to be hauled onto the shore, even in the worst of weather. And storms at sea have been a familiar part of life off the Yorkshire coast. This great lighthouse at Flamborough Head was built in 1806 to guide ships into the relative protection of Bridlington's so-called Bay of Safety, where they could shelter from fierce northerly winds. However, on one infamous night in 1871, the wind suddenly shifted to the east, and more than 400 ships were trapped in the bay. At least 30 of them were sunk, and dozens of seamen lost their lives. Many of those ships sunk in the Great Storm were said to be severely overloaded with coal, which they were transporting from Newcastle to London. And after that disastrous night, pressure built up for greater safety at sea. The Derby MP, Samuel Plimsoll, championed an idea from Lloyd's, the insurers, to prevent ships from sailing dangerously low in the water. And this was the result, the Plimsoll line, marked clearly and visibly on the hull of a ship as a guarantee to the insurers that she was not overloaded. If Lloyd's inspectors couldn't see the Plimsoll line, the ship was uninsured. So that Bridlington storm of 1871 helped to evolve a system that was simple, effective, and used the world over. Well, some of the people of Bridlington look a little overloaded today as they approach the Spa Royal Hall, where our experts are waiting to see what they've brought along.
Well, of its type, it's a little gem. It doesn't have the feeling about it of being bought recently.
No, well, I think my mother bought it at auction about 60 years or so ago, and we've loved it ever since. And
it's been loved and cared for ever since. Now, it's a standard model, the sort of table that was designed and made after the 1860s, 1870s, very popular in late Victorian homes and houses from about 1875, when mass production of the model became popular. What lifts this one out of the ordinary is the quality and the decoration. Nearly all of them were decorated with a burr of some sort, burr walnut, burr maple, several of those very tight bird's eye design timbers. Yeah. The important thing is that this one has a border here of walnut, which has got little panels of marquetry with ivory bell flowers in. So as soon as you see that, then you know you're looking at quality, and we look for further clues. And to do that, if you look down here, this is the standard pattern. A turned column and a simulated flute or reed, in this case created by a line of black, but between the burr and the black is an extra little line of boxwood. Oh. Now, when this was new, this was a golden honey colour, similar to this. Then there was white, and then there was black. And if you look very carefully, you could take a magnifying glass and look very carefully, the quality, the precision with which that is put in is superb. This is exhibition quality. And also, all of this beading is gilded, it's gilded brass, and here too, gilded brass, and here. Now, when that was new, that must have sparkled like dew in the morning sun. Absolutely lovely, really lovely. And then a sweep of the leg, and then a Grecian key pattern here. So you've got a combination of Renaissance style in the classical manner.
Would it be English?
It is an English one, and it might have been made by Holland and Son, or Crace was another great maker of this type of furniture. It really is quite exceptional. And as far as I can see, nothing
pity
wrong.
about that.
Well, you know, I really wouldn't worry. I mean, what, a little splash has gone through, left on overnight or something, has eaten through the polish. It's much better to see that than try and restore it, because you'll spoil the rest of that wonderful patina, which you can never get again. So I would leave as part of the joy to me. Now, having said all that, and bearing in mind that most of the mass production models are in the sort of £200 to £300 range, you have to consider whether or not this has been insured. Do you have it specifically mentioned?
No.
Right.
I thought it was in the £200 to £300 mark.
No. It's, I would have thought, more likely to be in the £2,000 to £3,000. That should be insured for £2,500. It is, as I said, a little gem.
Thank you
Lovely
very
to
much.
see.
Thank you.
Well, my father bought it from a little house window shop in Filey about 65 years ago, and he paid a guinea for it. And the shopkeeper said to him then, "You'll never regret buying that."
Was he a collector of porcelain?
Yeah, my father, yes,
He
yes,
was,
he was. Yeah.
Did he tell you what he thought it might be?
Oh, and yes, he knew it was a goat and bee jug.
A goat and bee jug?
Yes.
Chelsea.
Chelsea.
The goat and bee jug was one of the first models done at the Chelsea factory.
Yeah.
And it has an incised triangle carved into the base before it's
Yes.
fired. And they are known with the date 1745 on them, right at
Yes.
the beginning of the factory.
Yes.
And of course they are actually terribly rare.
Yes.
And a good one will make £5,000–10,000 and one with a date on it, even more than that. But I have some bad news for you. It's not Chelsea.
Isn't it?
No, it's not. It's Coalport.
Oh.
And Coalport made
Yes.
these bone china ones, it's even the
Yes.
wrong material,
Yes.
in the 19th century.
Yes.
And they did go as far as putting the incised triangle onto
Yes.
the bottom. Now, the thing that interests me about this are two things. I don't know if you can see the change in colour here
Yes.
and how
Yes.
flat that is.
Yes.
That was done because it warped a bit in the kiln or got
Yes.
some rubbish stuck to its bottom.
Yes.
And they put it on a grinding wheel and
Yes.
ground it smooth, right?
Yes.
And actually this mark has been carved into the base after it was fired, right? So
yes.
it didn't have a mark on when it was made.
No.
So that's another indication it couldn't be right.
Yes.
It's also far too thin, it's slip cast.
Yes.
And of course it's called a bee, goat and bee,
Yes.
because you've got a goat and a bee on it.
Yes.
As it is, it's going to be worth somewhere in the region of 40 or 60 pounds.
Yes.
Now, what do you think about this one?
Well, we've always called it the Derby vase in the family, but we think it's perhaps Worcester.
Well, Derby did both those blue grounds and that style of gilding. And in fact, if we upend it, you can see in there
Yeah.
the Derby mark.
Oh, I've never
The
looked
crown
at-
above
Oh,
two
yeah,
battens and
yeah,
dots.
So it is a
So it is Derby.
Yeah.
The family tradition was right.
Yes.
It's a campana-shaped vase. It dates from the early 19th century. It's very, very beautifully painted with flowers. I mean, that is wonderful work.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's a good vase. It's going to be worth somewhere in the region of £1,200 to £1,500. Very nice.
I think this is one of the most charming sets for a very small child to have.
Yes.
Were you given it?
Yes, I was. My parents gave me it. And I think they gave me it for Christmas, the year that the film came out, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So of course,
1938?
that's right.
Yes.
And I mean, I've had them in a box for years and years and years. And when I've moved home, they've moved with me. But I never thought of them as being a collector's item.
I suppose you haven't got the original box, have you?
I haven't, no,
Oh.
unfortunately. I wish I had, but no, I haven't.
Well, they're in wonderful condition. Very often, Snow White is missing because she's treated as a doll
Ah, yes.
and
yes.
gets really separated from the dwarfs.
Yes.
Of course, we've got Sleepy, Sneezy, Dopey, Doc. I'm going to pick Grumpy up for a moment because
yes, that is Grumpy.
they've all got this. It shows they're made by Chad Valley.
Yes.
They started off in the 19th century as Johnson brothers,
Did they?
and they moved to Birmingham in 1917.
Yes.
And because it was Harborne on the Chad, the River Chad,
Yes.
they then changed the name to Chad Valley, and that's how they were born, as it were. And they registered in 1919. and started making soft toys of all sorts. The fact that you've got the whole set and Snow White in her original clothes and her lullaby still works. The last one in such good condition at auction realised at £2,500.
Never, no.
I know it surprised me.
2,500.
And that didn't have the box either.
Really?
My word, isn't that sweet? A little dog on a cushion, a little screw top, and the initials EO and 1795, which is absolutely right as rain. It's made in Yorkshire in a style that's called Prattware. That's all this lovely colour, this ochre colour, that ochre yellow, and these little tiny spots of blue and ochre, which are very, very typical Prattware. And I suppose it's a little snuff box. It's almost 200 years old. Terribly unusual and very rare. Any idea what the value is?
No, I haven't.
No. I'd reckon something like about £600 to £800, perhaps even a bit more. Yes.
Really?
Terribly unusual.
I didn't know it's as much as that.
This is a Derby teapot, and a very fine one too. But the interesting thing about this is not actually this itself, not the teapot, it is the cover. Because it has been completely restored. But this has been brilliantly done. Now, you tell me.
Well, I bought it damaged, really, because I thought I'd never be able to afford a perfect piece.
Yes.
And the lid was in probably about 14 pieces,
Really?
glued together with some awful brown glue, and there was even a hole in it. And I thought it was worth doing.
But it,
Well,
I mean,
hope
it
it
is
was worth
fantastic.
doing. Yes.
I mean, look at the colours. I mean, the blue is almost matching there. I mean, it is matching, actually, if you put those two together. The gilding, okay, you can't get this burnished colour because when that is mercurial gilding, and when that was put on, it was then fired to a high temperature. If you're restoring something like this, you can't get that lovely burnished effect.
So this is why it's slightly raised.
It's yes, he's actually raised it slightly. But the painting is immaculate. And the colour of the porcelain there, the way it blends in, and the little knop here, and so forth. It's brilliantly done.
Yeah.
Let's say this teapot, in fine condition, mint condition, would have been worth £500. With a damaged or restored cover, it's probably worth half. But if it was just without this very smashed cover, it was worth hardly anything at all.
No.
So you have taken the plunge, you've spent a lot of money, I think very wisely, to this and restored a wonderful object. I think you've done brilliantly.
Thank you very much.
And the restorer has too.
Oh, the restorer
She's brilliant,
has,
isn't it?
definitely, yes.
They are the sort of cards that schoolboys at the time would go into the local shop and they'd buy a little pack of the cards, and in fact on the back here it has all the details about them. Baines football cards, made by Baines of Bradford, and he invented this type of card, and they were really made for collecting. Sometimes children stuck them into albums, but in fact in this case they're very scarce because they've never been stuck into albums. They're loose, but they're beautifully produced lithographs. They're all coloured lithographs, and you can see that they're very well coloured. Has anyone ever valued them for you, as a matter of interest?
No.
You haven't?
A couple of years ago, my husband died, and they were still in the brown bag then.
Right.
So I decided I'd put them in these albums.
Yes. Well, if these came up for auction today, I should think they might sell for something in the region of £1,000 to £1,500.
Oh, no.
I promise you, yes, yes. They're really wonderful.
I've seen people act like this on television, you know, and I've thought, they've known all about it, really.
Yes.
But really?
Yeah?
They were left to me by an elderly relative that collected them over a period of years. And I've had them about 10 years, and they've been in my loft gathering dust.
You've done a clean-up job on them. They don't look terribly dusty. The thing we can say about them generally is that you have a collection of English drinking glasses dating from between about 1760 and about 1820. But the glass that attracts me most of all, because we're almost in the right region for it, is this glass.
Well, she always thought it was a Bealby.
Yes.
And it had been enamelled by the brother and sister who went in for that sort of thing. And she bought it just for that
and
purpose.
of course the Bealbys were based in
Newcastle, weren't they?
That's right.
That's right, yes.
That's right. very, very sought after glasses. But sadly, the problem with that one is its condition.
Yes.
If it weren't for the fact that this was severely broken, this would be a £1,000-pounder.
Oh.
And I think to maybe an academic collector, someone who would want that particular example of painting, this still has a residual value, maybe in the region of £150. What a shame.
My mother bought them during the war from Carmichael's in Hull, and there were originally 4, and she just bought the 2.
Ah,
yes.
That's rather sad to hear that, because these are not actually a pair.
No.
They're 2 different dates and 2 different makers.
Really?
Yeah. One is made by William Caffe in 1767.
Mm-hmm.
This one is the one made by Dorothy Mills in 1764. But they're a lovely design of candlestick.
Yes.
And candlesticks in the 18th century were made in 2 ways, either cast or filled. And the best ones were cast.
Yes.
And had they been the same date and maker, at auction they would probably fetch in the region of £2,500, maybe £3,000.
Yes.
The fact that they are different dates and makers, even though they are exactly the same design, I think they'd probably fetch in the region of £1,200 to £1,500.
Yes, yes.
Well, I bought that in a house sale.
Right.
And I paid £2 for it.
£2? I expect you do know what it is. It's a Bowie knife with a clip-back blade. The maker here is William Sansom and Company, King's Cutlers. The horse's head is traditional with these early type of Bowie knives. This is natural antler.
Right.
Now, Bowie knives are collected by American collectors. Some of the finest Bowie knives in American collections were made in Sheffield.
Really?
And also many were sent through the Hudson Bay Company and they filtered down through into America.
Right.
And I'm sure that any American collector would really love this Bowie knife. If you were to sell this today, your £2 has been a wonderful investment, because you would have to pay £2,000.
You're joking.
I'm not joking.
Really?
Yes, indeed. And
My
in fact,
word.
I'm being very...
My word.
I'm being very kind. I think it could fetch more, but I'm sure of £2,000.
Good Lord.
So what a wonderful investment.
Wasn't bad, was it?
Yes. Pity there wasn't half a dozen.
Well, right. Oh, good. You've made my day, my friend. Thank you very much.
It's very interesting to come across an English bracket clock which is not in a wooden case. It's in a brass case, and I understand you have the original receipt for it.
Well, it isn't the original. It's what my late grandfather had when he purchased it from the... it's very delicate.
It's rather fragile. They're rather more fragile than the clock.
Yes.
So he purchased this in 1948 and he paid £10.
Yes.
You don't know the history of the clock before that, then?
Not at all.
Well, the reason I asked that is that it's got a brass case, but you can see on the front here traces of a darker colour.
Right.
And if you look on the bill, it says, in fact, 8-day English striking clock in a bronze case. And I rather suspect that when it started life, this clock was actually bronzed, a sort of dark chocolate brown colour. The clock's a very good one. It's a good English-made movement, a striking clock, striking on a bell, quite loud. There are traces of a material on the inside of the case as well. And I wondered if that was originally put there to muffle the sound a little, because it was rather too loud. So you might think this is a library clock or something like that. I'm also interested by the ecclesiastical imagery of the clock. The rose window effect here, arches over here. I'd like to think this was originally made for a churchman, but I wouldn't like to say. But I think what it represents is the explosion in ecclesiastical architecture that took place in the mid-19th century, which placed this firmly in the Victorian era. Another nice touch there, you've got the key here, which opens both the front and the back. Do you know what the key is for? I mean, apart from locking it, do you know why they locked up their cases?
No, not really.
Well, the main reason is, once the clock was wound by the master or mistress of the house or the housekeeper, it was locked. And that meant the servants couldn't alter the hands of the clock if they were late with their work.
Right.
It's a good convex silver dial, signed S. Sniddle, that's Samuel Sniddle of Sheffield.
Yes.
Now, the Sniddles actually were a family firm. They went back to as early as 1770 and was certainly working as late as 1840 according to the records, though I suspect this clock is somewhat later in the 1850s or even 60s, so they continued then. But we have the original receipt here which says it's worth £10. Worth a little bit more than that. For insurance purposes, I think around the figure £1,200 would be appropriate.
Right. That sounds okay.
I'm glad to hear it, thank you.
Well, the first thing to be said about these is that they're not terribly valuable.
No.
It's just that they're extremely interesting objects.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about them yourselves? Have you done a research
Well,
on them?
no. They were my mother's, and I believe she got them from an antique shop.
They have a mark on the bottom. It's an AR monogram for the initials of the Elector of Saxony and King of Poland, Augustus, and R for Rex. Now, like every little princeling and aristocrat in the late 17th, early 18th century, he wanted his own porcelain factory. Because porcelain was so highly rated that if you could get your own porcelain factory, discover the secret of making true or hard-paste porcelain, then you were going to become one of the most powerful people in Europe. And Augustus was completely bonkers about porcelain. He built an entire palace, the Japanese palace, which he filled with oriental things. And he set up the Meissen factory, which is just outside Dresden. Now, major pieces were made at the factory for him, and the AR mark was put on the bottom. At that date in the 18th century, and indeed right up until the late 19th century, there was no protection covering trademarks. So you could copy anything, right? And because Dresden had got such a great name, all the factories copied it. I mean, if you think of the great English 18th century factories like Worcester and Derby and Bow and Longton Hall and Lowestoft, they were all putting cross-sword mark, the factory, the Meissen factory mark, on the bottom of their pot. They were all forgers. And in fact, this mark we know is of a lady decorator in Dresden called Helena Wolfson. And then Meissen took her to court at the end of the 19th century, and she lost the case, and that was the first time when a mark became protected, and so nobody else could copy it. And she changed her mark to a crown. This is typical of her work, in Meissen style, but not exactly copying a Meissen pattern. This is actually a chocolate cup with two handles.
Chocolate?
Yes, although I don't think it could ever really be used. It'd be jolly difficult to drink out of something with these notches in it. You would pour it and it'd all run down the side of your mouth. Purely a cabinet cup.
Yes.
But they're very pretty, and people like this sort of very feminine feel to them. And they're going to be worth each one in the region of 40 to 60 pounds a time. But a nice story to them.
Yes. Thank you very much indeed. You told me quite a lot that I didn't know.
I'm pleased.
Thank you.
One is used to people on the Antiques Roadshow coming in with things they found in their attics, but when a museum finds something in its attic, it's really quite something. Well, you're curator of Thurby Hall, which is the local museum and art gallery to Bridlington. What can you tell me about it?
Well, we don't actually have any information about it at all. We don't exactly know where it came from. We certainly don't know who the artist is. We can't find a signature on the picture anywhere. But what I find particularly fascinating about it is that it's absolutely packed full of local detail.
Because this is Bridlington Harbour, isn't it?
Yes, this is the north side of Bridlington Harbour, looking towards the North Pier.
As you say, it's got the most fantastic detail in it. I mean, the quality of the painting is really tremendous. I'm thinking particularly of details like the washing hanging up here, and the brickwork is so brilliantly rendered, isn't it? And if we look on the harbour wall there with those very elegant figures promenading along, I think from the costume there, we wouldn't date it that much after 1900. I wish I could tell you, just like that, who it's painted by. I've been racking my brains trying to think, and I honestly do not at this stage know. But it's a really wonderful, wonderful piece of painting. It's certainly a picture that one could imagine at auction being worth, well, in excess of £10,000 anyway.
Really?
So let's go on to the next one, because the next one was rather a thrill as well. Now this what immediately, of course, caught my eye is the fact that it's been partially cleaned, and you can see what a beautiful blue has come through where the cleaning has been undertaken. And more of these figures have been revealed also down in this corner. The more that the dirt has been cleaned off, the more of a revelation it's been, and I can hardly bear that the whole job hasn't been done. Do you know why that might have been?
Well, again, we have no records of who gave it to us, how it arrived at the museum, or indeed what sort of conservation and cleaning was started.
Yes.
So it's definitely a job which has got to be completed.
Job's definitely got to be completed, because what we have here is, the subject is St. John the Baptist preaching to these very murky people over here. It seems to me to be probably Italian, possibly round about, painted round about 1700. My recommendation would be, in this situation, before actually taking the cleaning any further, I think it's such a good picture that possibly it should be photographed in this state, and the photograph sent to the National Gallery, and one should await their response, and then they may indeed be the people actually to undertake the rest of the cleaning, because I think this is a picture with quite a potential to it. I mean, I certainly wouldn't hazard a precise estimate of what it might be worth, but even in this state, it's obviously worth several £1,000s. But with cleaning and further research and a full attribution, then maybe we're talking about, well, tens of thousands of pounds. So let's hope this is the beginning of a new era for the Bridlington Museum and Art Gallery.
Yes, and I think this will take pride of place in our hanging. Thank you very much.
Well, I've seen a good many tea caddies over the years, but none prettier. I say it specifically because of that decoration on the top, which is as much of a Regency girl's bouquet as you could ever see on a little piece of furniture, which is what this is. So, tell me, how long have you had this? It's a family one?
It's not mine, it's my stepmother's.
Right.
It's been in the family for, and she said it's either her great-grandfather or her grandfather, I'm not sure which.
Right.
But he was in the tea trade, apparently, and he got it from that, yes.
It has to be round about sort of 1795 to 1810. That's the sort of period. Very, very charming indeed. The inside, of course, was originally with foil, and the idea was, of course, the tea was quite expensive, but it was so fashionable that when you went to someone's for dinner, instead of taking a pot plant, you either took a cone of sugar or you took a little present of tea. And then you'd got a sort of everlasting gift, because when the tea was finished, then you could replenish it and keep the box. And of course, quite a valuable collector's item. It's a piece which would certainly cost you in the region of £1,500 to replace.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Right, Urania's Mirror, or A View of the Heavens, published by Samuel Lee, 18 The Strand. Now, Samuel Lee was publishing at about the time when the Prince Regent became king, so he's about sort of 1820, 1830. But this is what surprised me. I know the box is dirty, but the inside was absolutely, virtually as fresh as the day it had been printed. These wonderful cards showing the firmament and stars that we could expect to find in the heavens. Here we have Perseus and the Caput Medusa. This is Perseus looking absolutely outraged here. The head of Medusa with all these snakes coming out of them. Going on, we have wonderful ones here. They're such gorgeous colours, but what relation they have to the firmament, I just don't know. Scorpio, Capricorn. I must say, this is one of my favourites. This is Orion the Hunter in the form of Hercules here with his lion skin. The lion skin almost appears to have got red lipstick on, if you can see that. When you hold it up to the light, of course, you can actually see through the little pin pricks that have got paper behind to make the bow opaque so that you can see through them. Tell me about them. Where do they come from?
They came from my husband's grandfather's father, so his great-great-grandfather. And then when our eldest boy got to be 6 or 7, he handed them to him. He thought it would be
Well, that's
nice
amazing,
for them
because they wouldn't have been new when his great-grandfather had them.
No.
But they have been kept in absolutely remarkable condition. The set is 32 cards, but you only have, you're missing 4 in actual fact.
I didn't know how many there was in the set at all.
Which is surprising, because they are in such superb condition. I would have expected them to be complete, but that doesn't really matter. They're highly collectible. If there were 32, the complete collection, I'd value them at £650. Well, lacking 4, not so much less, about 450, something like that.
It's something like 20 or 30 pounds.
No, these are exciting. And as I say, holding them up and looking at the stars with them must have been great fun.
Well, I inherited it from my mother about 2 years ago. She purchased it in Blackpool from a couple of ladies many years ago. I don't think she paid very much for it.
Do you know what? Or
I've no idea, but I know that she wouldn't have paid very much because she didn't have the money to pay very much, you know.
And do you know anything about the sculptor who has signed the piece here?
No. This is one of the reasons that I wrote to the BBC, because it's always intrigued me.
M. Moreau stands for Mathurin Moreau, who lived between 1822 and 1912, and was one of about 7 artists with the name of Moreau, a whole family of them in France, generally working in the late 19th century, typically doing bronzes, but here you've got a marble, presumably the first stage before they then did casting perhaps from it in bronze of the same model. I think the story here, why she's exposing herself like that, Cupid down the bottom here has let fly one of his arrows, or is about to let fly, and she's preparing herself for it. I think this is what it's about. Now, in terms of value, if you look at the column, which is a separate part, those can make £500–700, that sort of figure, even without the marble statue on top. Relatively, the price for a good, almost Art Nouveau marble like this isn't that great.
No.
I would have thought for the figure on the stand, you're perhaps looking at between £3,000 and £5,000, which is presumably an increase on what was given by your grandmother.
Oh, indeed, I'm certain it was. I'm certain it was.
It's my husband's great-great-great-grandmother's, and we know that because there's a portrait of her actually wearing it.
To me, it's a very nice piece. It's what we term a parure, or a suite of jewellery, and it would date from around about 1860 to 1880. Very typical of the style. It's actually mounted in 15-carat gold, set with these little half pearls. These are actually cut in half and close clipped into the joints to save them standing up too proud, and also to keep down the cost. You've got 2 for the price of 1. Emeralds in the centre. Now, when I say emeralds, it conjures up very, very expensive gems, but in fact these are what we term foiled emeralds. They have coloured paper behind them to make them look a good colour. They need necessarily be a good quality. It has all this, what is termed as Etruscan wirework and beadwork on it. That's copies from the ancient Etruscan jewellery. The one danger point with these always, and it's nice to keep things in the case, but always be careful when you close the case because of these little fringes. They're very, very delicate. Invariably they get shut in the corner of the box. You know, it's a very, very nice suite. If I said to you at auction, I would expect that suite to make something in the region, probably about £2,000. You'd have to insure it a bit more than that. So whatever you do, look after it.
You haven't better keep it in the bottom of the drawer anymore.
Oh, no, it's safe.
A splendid pair of plates. Where did they come from?
Well, my father bought them in either Brighton or Eastbourne in the early 1930s.
What did he pay for them?
He paid 6 guineas for the 2 of them.
Well, 6 guineas, you could feed a family for a month on 6 guineas in the 30s. It was a fair amount to punch, wasn't it?
Yes, I suppose it was.
Have you done any research on them or found anything out about them at all?
Well, according to the shop, they came from the Tsar's yacht.
The Tsar's yacht? I wonder, that could possibly be true. They are, of course, both Russian, as you're determined.
Yeah.
One of Alexander III, dated 1891, and this one is Nicholas II, 1903. And it's interesting that they are, although different years, they're the same pattern. And it suggests that they have remade the pattern to match.
Yes.
And the yacht sounds like a perfectly sensible pedigree. They've improved quite considerably on his 6 guineas.
Yes.
Would you believe £1,500, £1,500?
Yes. No, couldn't have done. No.
I think, yeah, £3,000 the pair. Really very nice indeed.
Oh, I'm very pleased.
Will you take great care of them, please?
Yes.
Better packing than you brought them.
This is absolutely immaculate.
Wonderful.
Have you got a box?
No, it was found wrapped in tissue paper in the bottom of the drawer.
Really?
Yes.
When you moved into the house, or...?
No, it actually belongs to a friend, and her mother-in-law died, and she found that wrapped in tissue paper
Well,
in the drawer.
what's so wonderful about it is all that is papier-mache, layers and layers of paper, which is then painted, and this wonderful, mad hairstyle, which was really in fashion in sort of 1820s.
Good grief.
What I love about it is the fact that she has a kid body. We can't see it because underneath this silk dress is bloomers, which are all sewn right down to her painted shoes, little painted pumps.
Papier-Mache as well?
No, the limbs and the shoes and the arms are all wood, and they were made in the southern part of Germany, Sonneberg, and they were made in many hundreds, if not thousands, and exported all over Europe, in fact all over the world, but usually they were exported unclothed. And what might have happened was they were sent over here and clothed in the fashion of the day by possibly couturiers here who then put it through the toy shops of the time. Her dress, of course, is original. The only thing I would say is that the pink is an extra. It would have been pink, but that's the one thing that goes when it's pink silk. In that condition, at auction, I can see that making upwards of £1,000, possibly £1,500.
Just that little thing?
Well, it's a part of history, isn't
it? It is, really. I think she'll be very pleasantly surprised as well, I am.
Yes.
Actually, I purchased it, and a farmer was selling up his goods and chattels. I went into the house, and this was there, and I said, well, look, just this table as it is there.
Right.
No leaves. I asked him how much he wanted for his table, and he said £5. It was filthy dirty, about an inch of grease on it. £5. And when I got home, I thought it didn't look like a large dining table. And I thought there must be leaves for that. I'll go back and see. So the table with the leaves has cost a tenner.
Wonderful, wonderful. Have you had anybody look at it and tell you how old it is? I mean, do you know anything about it?
Years ago, I had an antique dealer come up, and he looked at it and he said, oh yes. He said, I think I've read something about that table. It's made by Richard Gillow.
It's the type of action which Gillow did develop, which he called his universal table.
Yes.
In fact, became popular after 1820. This isn't a Gillow table, but it's a Gillow-style table. The interesting thing is, of course, the base itself, which does give us a clue to the date in that rather late double knee, which is very sort of 1830s, really. Yeah. The other thing that's happened to it is because of the expanse of table, to give it extra stability at some time, someone's extended the legs. You see this part here?
Yes.
That was actually put on probably 100 years ago.
Yes.
Because originally the casters would have come down there.
I did wonder what happened, why that was there.
So that was an extension to make it wider by about 4 to 6 inches to compensate for the vast expanse of table.
Yes.
But apart from that, the base is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If we just pull it out together, if you pull and I pull together, that's right, well, that's fine. Then you can see the action which was the universal type of extending dining table. Now, it's got 3 leaves, you say?
3 leaves, yes.
3 leaves.
Seats 12.
Right. I would suggest that originally there would have been a 4th leaf. It will just take a 4th leaf if you pull it right out, which would make it a 14-seater, which was common at that time. Now, the problem is, what do you do when it's fully extended because it becomes unstable? And have you ever felt under these corners, if we close the table up now, have you ever felt under here, at each corner there's a hole?
Yes.
And what was supplied with this table originally was 4 leaves and 4 turned legs. And when you had it fully extended, you screwed the legs on. And that's what those are for. Now, it's a wonderful colour. I mean, you've cleaned it properly and treated it over the years, and the best thing for a dining table is use. And it really looks good. It's a credit to you, and I think you bought well. In today's market, your £10 investment has turned into £10,000.
Wow. As much as that?
It's worth £10,000 on the open market today. The extending dining tables are very much sought after.
What appealed to the Edwardian public was children and dogs. And here you've got the ultimate collection of children and dogs in one picture. You can see it's by Arthur J. Elsey, and it's dated 1905. Now, have you had it for a long time? Or?
About 25 years.
25 years?
Yeah.
And you inherited it?
Yeah, we acquired it from a friend of ours. They left it in a will for my wife.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I think it's the most wonderful present to inherit. I think the subject's so charming. You have a little boy trying to throw a snowball at his sister, which is typical, sort of thing that my children do. What I particularly like about it is the quality of the fur here on the dog, and the expression, and the tremendous attention to detail throughout the whole picture. And it seems to me it'd make a perfect Christmas card.
Yes. Correct.
And you have one, do you?
Yeah. Yes.
It's been made a Christmas card. Well, that's fascinating. Do you have it insured by any chance?
No.
You don't? Well, I think you ought to. I mean, it's I think, so exciting. A number have appeared at auction in London over the years, and I believe that it should be insured for £50,000. And I think if you sold it, it might be worth between £25,000 and £40,000. But the sky's the limit, really. With something as interesting as this and as commercial as this, if you get two wealthy people who want it, you know, anything might happen.
50,000?
So what you get, you ought to take it to a bank, perhaps, and keep it there or something.
I think so.
It's rather a shame, though, isn't it? Because it is so beautiful.
It is.
Marvellous. Well, we've had a very interesting and rewarding day here in Bridlington, and we end now with some tangible mementos of a local heroine. She was the great woman aviator, Amy Johnson, whose family lived here in Bridlington. This is the flying suit that she designed and had made herself, together with the helmet, and this is a scale model of the famous Gypsy Moth aircraft, which she called Jason, and in which she made her epic journey from England to Australia in 1930. Of course, the first woman ever to do so. This silver plaque presented to her is in the shape of Australia, and you can see that her route from England is actually studded with rubies and emeralds. But you know, for me, the most eerie memento of all is this bag, which is the only thing we have providing a clue as to what happened to Amy Johnson. In 1941, she was delivering an aeroplane for the RAF and was lost over the sea. We still don't know to this day whether she was shot down, ran out of fuel, or got lost in the fog. But shortly afterwards, this, her personal bag, was recovered from the Thames estuary. And all of this kindly loaned to us today by the Sowerby Hall Museum, who keep a permanent exhibition in honour of Amy Johnson. So our warm thanks to the people of Yorkshire. We're off now to Sussex, where I very much hope you'll join us next week at the same time. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye.